making sense of love, of loss, of inhumanity, of being human, of being here, of the unseen, the unknown, of others, of yourself, of your choices, of your world, of our world. How? Use your gut. Use your heart. Use your soul to clarify, unify, and guide the way. Welcome to the latest floating poetry broadcast, and thank you very much for leaning in and to this show, number 192, coming to you live from the clarifying coast of Rhode Island. This is your poet and guiding spirit in the poetosphere, Colin Goedecke, a voice here and elsewhere for living our days more fully, more alively, more poetically. Last week's broadcast, if you didn't have a chance to listen, was sounding out. The ways we hear and are affected by sounds of varied kinds, from our senses being awakened by them, to emotions being stirred, to our spirits being enchanted. And the sources sound arises from, especially from within ourselves, our deeper selves, our pure selves, among other interesting sharings and musings. Show 191 if you want to go and listen into that, or again. Well, this week, making sense of your world, deciphering, interpreting, discerning, and understanding it, parts and sometimes large swaths of it, especially when it's confusing or confounding, mystifying or bewildering. Ways to go about parsing, unscrambling, unraveling, figuring things out, often things important to our peace of mind, our peace of being, our ability to navigate our daily lives, our equanimity, our sense of the future, our feelings of possibility. So, I've framed out a broadcast of cultural commentary, poetry, quotes, anecdotes, inquiry and discovery around this theme, ideally to help us divine together or reflect on how we divine into muddy, mystifying, or unpuzzled out places, events, and situations in our worlds. Let's make our way. Linda Hogan, The Sandhills. The language of cranes, we once were told, is the wind. The wind is their method, their current, the translated story of life they write across the sky. Millions of years they have blown here on ancestral longing, their wings of wide arrival, necks long, legs stretched out above strands of earth where they arrive with the shine of water, stories, interminable language of exchanges descended from the sky, and then they stand, earth made only of crane, from bank to bank of the river, as far as you can see, the ancient story made new. Thank you, Linda Hogan, The Sandhills, from her collection Sing, or it might be an anthology actually, Sing, Poetry from the Indigenous Americas. She's a lovely poet, by the way, in her own right. Francisco Alarcón, Words are Birds. Words are birds that arrive with books and spring. They love clouds, the wind, and trees. Some words are messengers that come from far away, from distant lands. For them there are no borders, only stars, moon, and sun. Some words are familiar, like canaries. Others are exotic, like the quetzal bird. Some can stand the cold. Others migrate with the sun to the south. Some words die caged. They're difficult to translate. And others build nests, have chicks, warm them, feed them, teach them how to fly, and one day they go away in flocks. The letters on this page are the prints they leave by the sea. Words are birds. Gracias, Francisco Alacon. That's from his collection, Laughing Tomatoes and Other Spring Poems. About that for a title. Well, here's one of mine from the old Dodge Estate, Madison, New Jersey, back in January of 2017. An acute case of anthropomorphia. Mine, but suffering gladly, from seeing, without dismissing, in the limbs, brows, and trunks of trees, in the hearts of stones, in the arteries and veins of winter ice, myriad mythical and animal faces, figures, traces, from lions to griffons, satyrs to sea creatures, along with a profusion of petro and hieroglyphs, runes and totems, and other clues of nature's conjuring, kinds too curious yet for me to divine, to decipher. You may suffer from that too, that wonderful, it's not a malady, but whatever we want to call it. From Westerly here by the sea, October 2023, last fall. This actually led off the program, The Stranger. That's in the playlist. The Stranger. Maybe it's someone you avoided or shunned simply because they were foreign or unfamiliar. Maybe it's someone you met somewhere far away, on a train, or out on a walk, or sitting on a bench in the park, who you poured or shared yourself, your story, or some secret or buried part of your heart or life out to. Maybe it's someone you dearly loved, that love later lost, became unknown, no longer seeable, or any way meetable. Maybe it's just a mystery you have yet to enter, another person you have yet to discover, to understand, to see as a fellow being, a kindred spirit. Maybe it's you. The Stranger. Anne Kennedy, The Arrivals. When we arrive at the lounge of everything, with our bags, handfuls of earth, the lives of our grandparents, and our memory devices, we expect an exchange of sorts. That is what we expect, and I think everyone deep down expects that we will not turn back. Through a high window we will connect stars like line drawings, translate the sparkles of the poet. We will sign the fascinating mouth of the speaker. We will sing lyrics that someone thought were pretty good. We will sing them, and we will not turn back. We will not. When our footsteps awaken fresh from a long, complicated journey during which the planet slid otherwise, we will likely remember a dream we once had and tell a version of it to the next person and the next, and realize hopefully they also have a dream to tell. And we will not do that thing where we won't listen to anyone else's dream. We will listen and interpret, signing, singing, saying, even though we have been instructed not to use ings, we will use the wisdom disseminated by our devices. We will not turn back. We will not. If on arrival there is wringing of hands, we will shake hands. And in the eye of a storm, we will make tea with our brilliant, fading bodies. We will do a variety of things while we can. We will bed down on the steps of the assembly if we have to. We will bed down in a court of law, and all beds anyway are temporary. And when we see that and realize we have traveled through the night, we have traveled and are not turning back, that will be the point at which we will arrive. Thank you, Anne Kennedy, The Arrivals. from Conversational Leadership, an online book by David Gurteen, Gurteen, on the difference between sense-making and meaning-making. Sense-making and meaning-making are two terms that are often confused or used interchangeably, but they have distinct meanings. Sense-making. Here's a straightforward definition from Dave Snowden. Sense-making: how do we make sense of the world so we can act in it? This is how I like to define sense-making. Sense-making is the process by which we make sense of the world, especially complex situations for which there are usually no simple, apparent explanations. Meaning-making and sense-making are often used synonymously, as we said, but they're different, and he defines meaning-making this way: the process by which we interpret situations or events in the light of our previous knowledge and experience. It's a matter of identity. It is who we understand ourselves to be in relation to the world around us. In other words, sense-making is about making sense of the external world. A simple way of looking at it is this way: if sense-making asks what is going on, meaning-making asks what are the implications of what's going on for me. So much of our sense-making, from my perspective, begins with how much and how well we can perceive, our powers of perception, and which we can develop. We can always develop them ever more. So here's a piece of mine from 2017. Can you open your lens? All the way. Your eyes, senses, sensibilities. Fill them with all the light flowing from every subject and object in your field of vision. Can you sharpen your focus to include their foregrounds, midgrounds, and backgrounds? Can you remove any filters? For pure sight is what you want, bright and wide, whole and clear. Let us keep opening our lenses. Let us do that. Well, there's also, what I say, the precious part that seeking plays and exploring plays. Of course, curiosity, which we'll talk about in a little while. And this is a piece of mine from Rhode Island, March 2021. Of course, many of us were wondering how to make sense of the world in the midst of a, quote, pandemic, which threw everybody asunder, upside down, inside out. So I was obviously musing, as billions of people were, on the meaning of life amidst that. And this arose. I better have a sip of water for this. Whoever you are, wherever and however you are, there are veins, great veins, mother loads of meaning, to be found, to be mined, inside and around you, to make your life all the richer, all the finer, all the more treasured and immeasurable. So become a good seeker, miner of real meaning, a panner and separator of the truly meaningful from the dross, the immaterial. And once found, be a good embracer, deepener and appreciator of it. You'll know you've struck gold when you feel it in your bones, when you feel it in your heart, when it passes the acid test of what your whole being so naturally knows, serves and nourishes the fleeting days, the irreplaceable years and moments you're awake and alive. Yes, whoever you are. Well, I always have questions, but this time around, I reached out again to a number of listeners and subscribers to the YouTube channel, and curated a handful of them to share with you in answer to some of the questions that I'm going to ask you, but that I asked them too, and others on top of that. So this is a bit fuller segment than normal, but I think it's worth it, worth sharing it with you. So, yeah, questions for us about making sense of our world, you of your world. So I'm going to pose them for you to ponder here and after here, after the show. And here are some of those answers in the mix that I got. What one big thing are you seeking to make sense of in your world right now? Stephen in New York said, making sense of what's causing chaos in the world. Dick in Texas said, the constant turmoil in Congress. It seems our elected officials have confused their roles. They supposedly represent the views of their constituents, but instead their own personal attitudes. American voters have to speak up to protect their voice and have their voices heard. Joy in New Jersey said, relationships. Which ones are necessary? Which ones are distractions? Individual versus society. The changing nature of reality. Also in New Jersey, Chris said, as a long-term body worker, I've been fascinated by the depth of wisdom inherent in the simplest of physical moves. This has been a lifelong endeavor. Most people are so busy doing, so agenda-oriented, and so disembodied, they miss the buried treasure. I call my body, quote, the underground temple. I've been on a decades-long journey to make sense out of all the variables that make this temple sacred. For example, how breathing is influenced by the sun and moon, how power is distributed to the muscles in simple tasks, the interplay of intention and the outside world, what the ancients understood about the known and hidden factors of physical expression, how we are a complex layer of energies in an incredibly entwined matrix of events, and how people are far more powerful than they know to create the life they desire. Chris, by the way, happens to be a Buddhist warrior monk known as Hayashi Tomio, and is a featured deeper well-dweller in conversation with me in the Poetosphere that you can sample there without subscribing. I encourage you to do that. It's a wonderful conversation about life, self, beingness, and other things, and deeperness. Next question was, what would help you make sense of it? I'm asking you that too. What you're trying to make sense of. Hugh out in Milwaukee said, my sixth sense. Our fast-paced, consumer-driven culture has left my five senses somewhat exhausted. Chris, again, simply finding the time and energy to explore all these dimensions. Next question for us. In these times of much turmoil and bewilderment that we're definitely in, what for you seems without any sense at all, common or otherwise? Ponder that. Stephen said, war and the inability of people to live in peace. Joy in New Jersey said, lack of critical thinking skills in the population. The inability for many to see the elephant in the room. Another question was, what in our world is making a great deal of sense to you? What is, my friends? Here's Chris, the ancient wisdom of past cultures who observed, understood, and point out to us that all of life, all the interactions of the vast universe that make up our reality will go through natural cycles of birth and death, of rise and fall. It makes sense that the old patterns of our civilization have reached their zenith and now must give way to the new. We can't just live for money, despoil the planet, live callously and superficially and expect things will be jolly in the future. Those of us living on the planet today are here to witness and participate in rebuilding a world beneficial to all. Absolutely. Well, that's obviously, if you know about the Poetosphere yet, it is meant to be an oasis of regenesis, both for individuals and for collectively, for society, for civilization, for all our world. It's part of the mission of it. Well, Joy in New Jersey answered that question about what is making a great deal of sense. She said she's a marvelous artist, by the way, in ceramics, especially the value of creative pursuits. And Stephen in New York City said, making music and performing and seeking to get my song, which is called Pledge of Allegiance to the Planet, into the Olympics opening ceremonies. Well, I'd like to hear that from him. And since I'm connected to the Olympics through the Truce Foundation of the United States and been involved in contributing to other Olympics, I might be able to open a door for that. Be happy to do that. Stephen, if you're listening, I'll do what I can. But do send me that pledge. Here's another question for us and them. Was there ever a time in your life you decided not to be sensible? And when and what was that experience like? Well, Stephen said, when I was a young man and I left my family. Joy said, pursuing art is not sensible, also non-sensible, equals the leap of faith that a relationship commitment is, that having children is, that love is. Art has saved me in times of despair, in times of loneliness, in times of disappointment. So I'm grateful for my years of artistic practice. Bravo to her. I am too, of mine. And Chris in New Jersey, once more, he answered this by saying, yes, during that time when most young people do not really understand what sensibility entails, and thus push their boundaries of responsibility. Young adulthood. I could have been 19 or 20. I owned a 1968 Rally Sport Camaro, canary yellow with a black front grille. It had a V8 327 horsepower engine, a muscle car. I was driving on the Garden State Parkway at night, coming back from the Jersey Shore. A sudden impulse hit me. How fast can this car really go? I threw caution to the wind, never gave a moment's thought to police or safety. 115 miles per hour on the speedometer. I noticed the front hood start to shake. Thankfully, my rational mind kicked back in. I didn't want the front hood to fly off and kill me or someone else. It felt exhilarating. I was adrenalized, wide awake, fully engaged, flexing my power, pushing the envelope of my being, testing my limits. We don't know what we can do until we try it. My takeaway is that when people are given power, they are bound to push it to the limits. Sadly, some exceed their limits, ending in disaster. I was lucky. I had the wherewithal to pull back from an edge I could only have intuitively known. I've since matured. As much as I am encouraged by my power to push the pedal to the metal, I've also been humbled enough to recognize my limitations and responsibilities. Well, thank you to all of them for those responses to the questions. And another listener here in Rhode Island sent in these questions for us. What if there is no sense to your world? That's big. What if the world calls you to acknowledge your capacity to make sense of the natural world, like the laws of physics, yet encourages you to leave this intellectual sense and enter the expanse of no sense, just the mystery? Is bewilderment the loss of understanding, or is it an invitation to explore a deeper sense beyond understanding? Is the attempt to make sense itself a vain attempt of your ego to assert itself? How often do you discover sense/sensibility in chaos? And are you skillful in doing this? Could residing in a place of love be the only real way to make sense of all the world, its interiors and exteriors? Is one of the greatest struggles we have as humans our constant need to know our purpose in order for there to be sense? And do we come to reside in our purest state when we are not sensible, not being, quote, sensible? Good questions. Thank you for those. Well, for me, dear listeners, the more earth schooling I get, the more I'm able to evolve and further raise my consciousness, and especially to use my intuitive powers to glean into things, which is how I live most of my days these days. I find the more they make sense, the more clear I am, close in my world. It doesn't mean they're not challenging at times or undesired, but there's a high resolution clarity. And when someone says to me about something, you're right, I say, no, I'm just clear. And I'd say farther out in parsing what's going on in the larger world, here I step back and connect seemingly random dots, like you're looking at the night sky, those stars, which often reveals a constellation, an orchestration, nothing random at all. So this, and applying my sensing into whether there's a hidden agenda at work or not, if there is, And the more there is, I move away from it. Give it no heed because there's some manipulation or machination involved. Conscious or unconscious. And, think Machiavelli at the extreme, but that idea. So sometimes around large-scale actions, seemingly insensible or confounding things, it helps to also ask the question, which in Latin is cui bono, C-U-I, bono. Who benefits? Who does it serve? On a financial level or political level or other level, power level, this can be greatly revealing. You might want to try that. I also remember what Gandhi said, actions express priorities. And conversely, if on the other side of this is where there's no agenda at all or any seeming one, I'm open to listening, to engaging, to achieve, with an eye to achieving some true or higher understanding. So, other questions may arise for you as we flow along here, but let's flow into the next parts of the show. A poem for you composed in Westerly here from my spirit brother Richard Allen, an old school man of Maine. He's also a sculptor of life-size horses, just so you know, if you don't know that. Horses made of driftwood. Wonderful creations. Well, this one opens with a quote by the comic actor back in time, W.C. Fields. Horse sense is good judgment that keeps horses from betting on people. He would say something like that if you know about him. Okay, so this poem is called Horse Sense for Richard Allen on his 81st birthday. You've got it in bales, from mane to hoof, a tall body of practical wisdom gained and sculpted by seasons of living, wandering, carefully observing, and making horses themselves. Down-to-earth sense harder and harder to find in our world. Straight-up sense we need more than ever in this world of increasing nonsense and no sense. Especially from you, a man who uses and shares it with such heart and true helpfulness. Love out to Richard. Vladimir Nabokov, the writer, from 1899 to 1977 were his years. Here's some wisdom from him in a lecture he delivered at Wellesley College in 1941. It's titled The Art of Literature. It's in a collection called Lectures on Literature. And he offers these interesting, eloquent words on common sense. I'm going to give you a little bit of it. In the fall of 1811, Noah Webster, working steadily through the seas, defined common sense as, quote, good, sound, ordinary sense, free from emotional bias or intellectual subtlety, horse sense. This is rather a flattering view of the creature, for the biography of common sense makes nasty reading. Common sense has trampled down many a gentle genius whose eyes had delighted in a too early moonbeam of some too early truth. Common sense has back-kicked dirt at the loveliest of queer paintings because a blue tree seemed madness to its well-meaning hoof. Common sense has prompted ugly but strong nations to crush their fair but frail neighbors the moment a gap in history offered a chance that it would have been ridiculous not to exploit. Common sense is fundamentally immoral, for the natural morals of mankind are as irrational as the magic rites that they evolved since the immemorial dimness of time. Common sense at its worst is sense made common, and so everything is comfortably cheapened by its touch. Common sense is square, whereas all the most essential visions and values of life are beautifully round as the universe or the eyes of a child at its first circus show. Thank you, Vladimir Nabokov. Wow, that's very interesting. I had not read that before until I was sourcing material. I have to think about that more. Maybe you do too. Julian Huxley, from his 1954 classic, The Doors of Perception. Human beings are immensely complicated creatures, living simultaneously in a half-dozen different worlds. Each individual is unique and, in a number of respects, unlike all the other members of the species. None of our motives is unmixed. None of our actions can be traced back to a single source, and in any group we care to study, behavior patterns that are observably similar may be the result of many constellations of dissimilar causes. The confusion only deepens when two complexities try to make sense of each other, as we do when we connect with one another. He says this: to see ourselves as others see us, is a most salutary gift. Hardly less important is the capacity to see others as they see themselves. Thank you, Huxley, for that. Lynn Pedersen, a poem from her. I chose some poems and other pieces for the show that I would say address making sense of ourselves in some way, what we're about inside, not just what we're parsing outside. So this is Lynn Pedersen at 40. Pattern or absence of pattern, the way a jet flies into blankness yet leaves a clear trail. I expect time to reveal an underdrawing, hatching of shadows, some rough plan visible through another spectrum of light. Once, at an ophthalmologist's office, through an accident of mirrors, I saw the interior of my own eye, the retina's veins like roots or a web. And then again 10 years later, this time in an astronomy book, galaxies, clusters of galaxies, superclusters of galaxies, strung out, strands of a cosmic web, the redness of that image, the light extending like roots, 13 billion years in every direction. Michelangelo could see a figure in a block of stone waiting to be freed. I want his vision when I look in a mirror, his mathematical principles for depicting space, his ability to translate 3 dimensions into stone. First, I'm in 2 dimensions, a photograph glued to the glass, then 3. I'm somewhere between the glass and the background. All my houses, friends, come and gone. How would he sculpt me? How far out of the stone have I come? Wonderful, new to me, her and that, at 40, from her collection, The Nomenclature of Small Things. Lynn Pedersen. Well, I hit the gong of curiosity a little bit earlier, and I have this from the pioneering biochemist Erwin Chargaff on the poetics of curiosity and the crucial difference between understanding and explanation. This is from his book, Heraclitean Fire. He lived from 1905 to 2002. Well, the Marginalian tells us that he was also an extraordinary writer, not only an eloquent explainer and champion of science, but a lyrical memoirist and an incisive, erudite, philosophical thinker, a master of what could best be described as biopoetics. Wonderful. I don't think I've ever seen that word. Biopoetics. He writes with infectious wonderment and tenderness about nature and human nature, knowledge and mystery, the electrifying joy of slicing through the darkness of being with the luminous saber of curiosity. Beautiful. Well, here in his words, our understanding of the world is built up of innumerable layers. Each is worth exploring as long as we do not forget that it is one of many. Knowing all there is to be known about one layer, a most unlikely event, would not teach us much about the rest. The integration of the enormous number of bits of information and resulting vision of nature takes place in our minds, but the human mind is easily deceived and confused, and the vision of nature changes every few generations. It is, in fact, the intensity of the vision that counts more heavily than its completeness or its correctness. I doubt there's such a thing as a correct view of nature, unless the rules of the game are stated clearly. Undoubtedly, there will later be other games and other rules. Appreciate that. Well, at one far end of the spectrum, I thought we have to give a nod to nonsense. So I went to Wikipedia, curious about how they talk about it. A communication via speech, writing, or any other symbolic system that lacks any coherent meaning. Sometimes in ordinary usage, it's synonymous with absurdity or the ridiculous. Many poets, novelists, and songwriters have used it in their works, often creating entire works for reasons ranging from pure comic amusement or satire to illustrating a point about language or reasoning. In the philosophy of language and of science, it's distinguished from sense or meaningfulness, and attempts have been made to come up with a coherent and consistent method of distinguishing sense from nonsense. So, they had here, of course, you would know about this, the first verse of Jabberwocky by Lewis Carroll. They give some examples. "'Twas brillig, and the slithy toves did gyre and gimble in the wabe. O'er mimsy were the borogoves, and the mome raths outgrabe." And the first 4 lines of The Mayor of Scuttleton by Mary Mapes Dodge. The mayor of Scuttleton burned his nose, trying to warm his copper toes. He lost his money and spoiled his will by signing his name with an icicle quill. Well, the philosopher Alan Watts, from the Tao of Philosophy, wrote this: Why do we love nonsense? Why do we love Lewis Carroll with his "'Twas brillig and the slithy toves did gyre and gimble in the wabe, all mimsy were the borogoves and the mome rats outgrabe? Why is it that all those old English songs are full of fal de riddly I do and hey nani nani and all those babbling choruses? Why is it that when we get hep with jazz, we just go booty booty boop de boo? And I may not have done that right, but that's what it looks like. And so on, and enjoy ourselves swinging with it. It is this participation in the essential glorious nonsense that is at the heart of the world, not necessarily going anywhere. It seems that only in moments of unusual insight and illumination that we get the point of this, and find that the true meaning of life is no meaning, that its purpose is no purpose, and that its sense is non-sense. Still, we want to use the word, quote, significant. Is this significant nonsense? Is this a kind of nonsense that is not just chaos, that is not just blathering balderdash, but rather has in it rhythm, fascinating complexity, and a kind of artistry? It is in this kind of meaninglessness that we come to the profoundest meaning. Alan Watts, thank you. From the Marginalian, Good Sense versus Free Hope, Margaret Fuller on Reaping Wonder from Everyday Reality. She was a transcendentalist grande dame, 1810 to 1850. She inspired the women's suffrage movement. I did not know that, and laid the foundation for modern feminism with her 1845 masterwork, Woman in the 19th Century. But she published something different in subject, but not in sensibility and spirit, which was Summer on the Lakes, in 1843. That's the title of the book. It's a record of her experiences and observations traveling westward from her native New England. Well, here are some of her words. All around us lies what we neither understand nor use. Our capacities, our instincts for this, our present sphere, are but half developed. Let us confine ourselves to that till the lesson be learned. Let us be completely natural before we trouble ourselves with the supernatural. We need only look on the miracle of every day to sate ourselves with thought and admiration every day. But how are our faculties sharpened to do it? Precisely by apprehending the indefinite results of every day. Who sees the meaning of the flower uprooted in the plowed field? The plowman who does not look beyond its boundaries and does not raise his eyes from the ground? No, but the poet who sees that field in its relations with the universe and looks oftener to the sky than on the ground. Only the dreamer shall understand realities, though, in truth, his dreaming must not be out of proportion to his waking. They work in the true temper, patient and accurate in trial, not rushing to conclusions, feeling that there is a mystery, not eager to call it by name till they can know it as a reality. Such may learn, such may teach. The mind is not, I know, a highway, but a temple, and its doors should not be carelessly left open. Thank you, Margaret Fuller. What do you think about that, about her advice 80 years ago? From Cobble Hill, Brooklyn, a poem on a tarot card, which happened to be a major arcana card, the High Priestess. This is, I titled this Seeing into the Mystery, April 2017. The tapestry of wonders and answers lying unseen by others below the surface of life, behind the accepted realms of assumed reality. Silence, stillness, and supreme awareness are the way into this world where vast wisdoms reside. I still believe it to be so. Here's another book, and a review from the Marginalian. Catherine May, M-A-Y, explores what it takes to shed the cloak of meaninglessness and recover the sparkle of vitality. In the book, Enchantment, Awakening Wonder in an Anxious Age, a shimmering chronicle of her own quest for a, quote, better way to walk through this life. A way that grants us, quote, the ability to sense magic in the everyday, to channel it through our minds and bodies, to be sustained by it. So I'm pointing you to that book. I would read you more from that, but I want to get to some other things. But you can also read the review in the Marginalian. The earth, for me, and maybe for you, is full of sense and deep resonance and other things. But whether or not we humans make sense of it at times is part of, I think, our not just mission here. I wouldn't say mission, but part of the joy of being alive. Gleaning into that. It's a piece I wrote in January of 2023, last year, for the geomancers. Everything is a stepping stone to walk and wonder over, a mark, a pattern language to glean into. Tree roots, tortoise shells, wind drifts, wormholes. Everything they divine on the fortune-filled ground divinates them. I wasn't sure if I was going to have time, but even if I don't, I want to mention it to you, just as on a sort of just very fun note, I suppose we could say. A song came to mind, as they sometimes do when I'm thinking of a given theme and I'm putting things together for a show. This is from rogersandhart.com, but you can find it everywhere. The song by many different singers, Bewitched, Bothered, and Bewildered. Introduced by Vivienne Siegel in the original 1940 Broadway production of Pal Joey. The song remains one of Roger and Hart's most enduring. Sophisticated, rueful, and a bit naughty, presents a vivid portrait of a seasoned adult confounded by the turbulence of new love. Well, Doris Day sang it first back in time, Mel Torme, others have sung it since, Celine Dion, Frank Sinatra, Sinead O'Connor, Streisand, Ella Fitzgerald, of course, Lady Gaga, others. Because I was thinking around our theme and why this came up to me about our efforts, longings, and successes, and sometimes failings to make sense of some relationships, especially loving ones. Well, just give you some of the lyrics. After one whole quart of brandy, like a daisy, I'm awake. With no bromo seltzer handy, I don't even shake. Men are not a new sensation. I've done pretty well, I think. But this half-pint imitation put me on the blink. I'm wild again, beguiled again, a simpering, whimpering child again. Bewitched, bothered, and bewildered am I. And on it goes. Great song. Okay. Speaking of love, a bit more. Liesel Müller, Love Like Salt. It lies in our hands in crystals too intricate to decipher. It goes into the skillet without being given a second thought. It spills on the floor so fine we step all over it. We carry a pinch behind each eyeball. It breaks out on our foreheads. We store it inside our bodies in secret wineskins. At supper, we pass it around the table, talking of holidays and the sea. Thank you, Liesel Müller, from her collection Alive Together, new and selected poems. Well, the next is by a very good friend, a dear friend, soul brother, and regular listener, fellow poet, Dr. Joe Adler, who's also in a deeper well-dweller conversation with me in the Poetosphere, among many others. It's hearable there. To subscribers, to our community of kindred spirits, all possibilitarians welcome. His poem is called Between. Between holding back and letting go, I forgot the rough ride, swept away in the riptide of your salt water sighs, rising and falling in the buoyancy of your thighs, sinking into the hot sand of an August sky. Polished, smooth in the tumbling of your woman waves, I follow the hollow of your wet sand footsteps, washed away by the current, until I understand why the ocean tastes like tears, why love is besieged by fear, and how we are saved from drowning by simply remaining here. How beautiful is that? Thank you, Dr. Joe, my friend. Love out to you. And Leslie, very much. Beautiful. I came across this colorful quote by Picasso. I'm wondering how you might fill in the blank. He said, "The world doesn't make sense, so why should I paint pictures that do?" How about that for a quote? So what would you say? The world doesn't make sense to me, so why should I blank? Fill that in. Are you struggling to make sense of the world? It's a piece by Gilbert Ross from soulhiker.com. It's a much longer read, but I just took a little sort of soupçon from it. Is loss of sense-making threatening our existence? We're living at a point in time of our evolution where the amount and quality of problems we're facing are existential in nature, or, that is, they're pointing toward gloomy scenarios of auto-destruction. Our present-day culture is unfortunately lacking the wisdom and insights to deal with the massive changes we're moving into. Our technological advancement is outpacing our growth in knowledge and wisdom, and our models of reality are failing us big time. Another way of looking at it is that there is a dissonance between our changing world and how we're mapping it internally. This is what is creating a series of crises in the world we know today. The focus of this article is the lack of sense-making, what I believe are some of its causes, and some ideas about possible future scenarios that can help us get out of this growing momentum towards self-destruction. It will help us, I hope, transcend our limited plane of perception, frameworks of thought, and our outdated models of reality in order to finally start making more sense of our responsibilities, the extent of our footprint on this planet, and, hopefully, start changing the ways we will save ourselves from any great destruction and move forward as a species. It's a good read. And I'd like to pair that with this piece of mine from July of last year, July 4th, actually, with a raised hand, by the way, I would say, to us all. Fourth gear. At what speed do we change gears? As a country, as a society, stop racing and start slowing down, shifting way down instead of up, to remove the risk of blowing the whole engine and ourselves up with it. Our culture, nature, a decent future. Does independence mean it's okay now or ever was all right to be reckless, to be thoughtless with our freedoms, to abandon our wisdoms, deeper human and earth knowings alike? While we're pausing to celebrate breaking away back in time from a brutal authority to a vital liberty, a troubling subject yet again these days, we might do well to also stop and think hard about applying the brakes, about returning to our senses, especially our common sense, remembering and revering all that's precious and conscious in this life, on this earth, and deserving of our upholding, of our preserving, of everyone's safeguarding. Well, interestingly, the poet Kavafi came to mind, and this poem of his fits in ways I felt for our times and often serious nonsense, political senselessness, social insensibility. This is, you may know this, it's translated by Edmund Keeley, the great translator of Kavafi, Waiting for the Barbarians. What are we waiting for? Assembled in the forum. The barbarians are due here today. Why isn't anything going on in the Senate? Why are the senators sitting there without legislating? Because the barbarians are coming today. What's the point of senators making laws now? Once the barbarians are here, they'll do the legislating. Why did our emperor get up so early? And why is he sitting enthroned at the city's main gate, in state, wearing the crown? Because the barbarians are coming today and the emperor's waiting to receive their leader. He's even got a scroll to give him, loaded with titles with imposing names. Why have our two consuls and praetors come out today wearing their scarlet togas? Why have they put on bracelets with so many amethysts, rings sparkling with magnificent emeralds? Why are they carrying elegant canes beautifully worked in silver and gold? Because the barbarians are coming today, and things like that dazzle the barbarians. Why don't our distinguished orators turn up as usual to make their speeches say what they have to say? Because the barbarians are coming today, and they're bored by rhetoric and public speaking. Why this sudden bewilderment, this confusion? How serious people's faces have become. Why are the streets and squares emptying so rapidly? Everyone going home lost in thought. Because night has fallen and the barbarians haven't come, and some of our men just in from the border say there are no barbarians any longer. Now what's going to happen to us without barbarians? Those people were a kind of solution. Thank you, Cavafy. Well, that goes back to at least the 40s, not the 30s, that poem. How apropos, that seems to me, for now. The barbarians. By the way, we're making our way to our last sort of segment, so we might run a little over our usual time. I hope that's fine with you, but stay with us if you like. Past the usual hour, if we go there. Psychotherapist Megan Devine, Devine. The book is It's Okay That You're Not Okay, Meeting Grief and Loss in a Culture That Doesn't Understand. She watched her young, healthy partner drown, and the sudden and senseless loss suspended her world. As it slowly regained the motive force of life, she set out to redirect her professional experience of studying emotional intelligence and resilience toward better understanding the confounding, all-consuming process of grief. This I pulled from the Marginalian. I haven't read the book yet, but I'd like to. In studying how people navigate intense grief, the loss of loved ones to violent crime, suicide, disaster, infant death, and other abrupt catastrophic traumas, she arrived at an arresting insight. Again and again, she observed that our most intuitive impulses about helping those whose suffering we yearn to allay, by cheering them up, by reorienting them toward the lighthouses in their lives amid the darkness, tend to only deepen their helpless anguish and broaden the abyss between us and them. And so she began to wonder, what does salve the immense sorrow we encounter in the world and experience in our own lives? So you may want to look up her book or more about it. Well, I do feel it's as vital to use our visceral senses, not just our mental ones or our emotional ones. And this is from New Year's Day, 2021, here in Rhode Island, in Watch Hill at the time, in the thick of the quote, pandemic, the global crisis of confusion, bewilderment, and waves of some directions that seemed not very sensible to many. So this is sensing, because I think we still need to go to these places and hone these things. Sensing. I'm thinking this first day of a new year, after an earth-shaking last, of animals in the wild, how they sense danger especially, and so keenly, so instinctively, have a whole awareness, always, of the visible and invisible, one their survival and survival of their young hinges on. And if we, animals too, if we have lost or disconnected our early warning radar, that sixth sense, our early ancestors and, quote, primitive tribal people in the bush, jungle, forest, kush also had and honed, depended on, attuned as they were to all the life or death sensations, signals, and vibrations of their environment. I'm picturing the deer in the winter woods whose large ears prick up, cup, and pivot to listen and assess the existence or imminence of a threat. The careful bird that takes knowing flight, or those fellow creatures feeling far into the ground, using their sensors in their skin, their Pacinian corpuscles, from elephants in their feet to bobcats in their guts, enabling them to feel earthquakes, tsunamis, eruptions, long before they arrive and move to safety. Sensors we possess, but now rarely practice using. Out of touch, as many, far too many are, with nature, outer and their inner. But all this dormant circuitry, maybe today, more than ever, no, definitely today, we men, women, humans need to awaken, activate, to feel, hear, taste, smell, if, how, where we're at peril, amongst predators. Keep us out of a or any great unseen jeopardy while there's chance. Now I'm no longer thinking, only cocking my ears, sharpening my sight, sniffing the surrounding air, feeling what's telling in my gut and subtly telegraphing below my open soles, sensing like an earthwise animal. There's a Stanley Kunitz, Kunitz poem you can find on poetryfoundation.org, The Layers. I'm going to save that for another time. There's also a wonderful one from poets.org. You can find it there by the marvelous poet Naomi Shihab Nye, Nye, Gate A4. No time for that today. Another time. So, coming to a last handful of things here. Asking the Way by Ko-un, U-N, translated by Suji Kwak Kim and Sunya Kim Kwak, from the Korean. You fools who ask what God is should ask what life is instead. Find a port where lemon trees bloom. Ask about places to drink in the port. Ask about the drinkers. Ask about the lemon trees. Ask and ask until nothing's left to ask. Thank you, Ko-un. From Morristown, New Jersey, 2019, what if it's a mystery play? This life. And we must, like Holmes and Hercule, carefully, cleverly follow its clues, however false at first, or faint, or far-fetched. Deduce the meaning hiding inside it all. Uncover the heart of our story, at least enough of the mystery to reveal the particular part we're each here, each meant, cast into the world to play. Rumi, unfold your own myth. Who gets up early to discover the moment light begins? Who finds us here circling, bewildered, like atoms? Who comes to a spring thirsty and sees the moon reflected in it? Who, like Jacob, blind with grief and age, smells the shirt of his lost son and can see again? Who lets a bucket down and brings up a flowing prophet? Or, like Moses, goes for fire and finds what burns inside the sunrise? Jesus slips into a house to escape enemies and opens a door to the other world. Solomon cuts open a fish and there's a gold ring. Omar storms in to kill the prophet and leaves with blessings. Chase a deer and end up everywhere. An oyster opens its mouth to swallow a drop. Now there's a pearl. A vagrant wanders empty ruins. Suddenly he's wealthy. But don't be satisfied with stories, how things have gone with others. Unfold your own myth without complicated explanation, so everyone will understand the passage, "We have opened you." Start walking toward Shams. Your legs will get heavy and tired. Then comes a moment of feeling the wings you've grown lifting. Thank you, Rumi. Thank you. Okay. Next to last, a poem I wrote this in February 2022 for a very dear friend, a spirit sister, but this could apply to each one of us, as far as I'm concerned. It's for Linnell Masterson on her birthday, February 2022. Masterson of the universe, but we can also say master of the universe. The vast universe within. From the great globe of your mercurial mind to the deep chambers of your sun-dialed heart, to the far reaches of your crystal-clear soul, and the evolving mastery and intermingling mystery that make it, yes, all the more adventurous, luminous, wondrous. love out to her, to Linnell, and to all of us mastering our universes, in whatever ways we do, and the mysteries. Well, last for now, till we're together again here in over these air waves and these sense-making waves. I hope they're sense-making. This came to me at the end of 2022, and I felt just needed to include that and end with that, since we're at various large, I would say, turning points, and knowing how vital clearing and clearness are, and deep intuition are to making any sense of anything. To the clearing. When left alone, our body and spirit know where to go, know the way to the clearing, to the opening and freeing, from the snare of the clutter to the blare of the chatter, the thorns of the fear. So go on to your clearings, beyond your endurings, grateful tears streaming when you get there. Down, down to the heart of all matter, to the root of all nature, like the nature of winter clearing the air, like the nature of winter stripped down to the bare. So onto your clearings, beyond all the veilings, grateful tears streaming when you get there. In times of great troubles, great worries, great sorrows, time for our seeing through the dark, the unseeing, to the light of the clearing, to the clearing of vision, of light in the world. So on to your clearings, beyond all the hurtings, grateful tears streaming when we meet there. Thank you again, friends, for leaning in, thinking and feeling in, for dipping into some sense-seeking, sense-making, sense-keeping. I'd be glad if you shared this or other floating poetry show links with friends. I'd also enjoy hearing any comments or reflections or revelations you have and would like to send me from listening to any of the shows, but this one not least, on making sense of your world. And likewise, I'd be happy to receive any contribution you'd like to make as thanks for these shows I create to engage and enlighten and expand you. You can donate by Venmo to Fivefold, Fivefold, at pipeline.com, or by PayPal to the same email, or you can simply mail a check to me to P.O. Box 1032, Westerly, Rhode Island, 02891, or donate through the Donate tab at thepoetorialist.com. Is there a theme? I always ask this because there may be you'd like me to create a broadcast about. If so, email me, Colin at thepoetisphere.com. And yes, patrons can still, this year, at some points of the year, privately host or sponsor me as a working poet in residence in the U.S. or beyond to create a new flight of poetic art dedicated to them. Email me to explore that. Meanwhile, you can continue to hear all the broadcasts online on YouTube on the Floating Poetry playlist there, and soon also elsewhere. I am continuing these weekly shows free to you and the public, but just now bringing them under the umbrella of the Poetisphere, which you can explore as a visitor or subscribe to as a member by the month or year. This oasis of regenesis I'm guiding is a portal to possibility, and a port of great calm and balm for the spirit, and a tonic in our stormier seas of tension. Come explore the free tasting menu there, and including a taste of the community of kindred spirits, of possibilitarians that's emerging, thepoetisphere.com. I'm also making month-long and year-long subscriptions possible for this year of 2024 for you and fellow listeners at a much-reduced membership using the code GLADTIDINGS, GLADTIDINGS, all one word, whether for yourself or to give as a gift to someone. And you can also, I'm very excited to tell you, hear me interviewed, appearing now in a Voce, V-O-C-E, dialogue that's up on all major podcast platforms, from Apple to Spotify, in conversation with Colin Goedecke about compassion, the poetics of life, self, possibility, and more. Just search for Voce Dialogues, V-O-C-E, Dialogues, and Season 2, Episode 2, and you will find that. Meanwhile, I hope you'll lean in here soon again. Until then, dear listeners, hone and trust foremost your inner senses, your deeper intuition, the clarifying wisdom of your heart, gut, soul, to make sense of whatever you're seeking or needing or wanting to figure out, purely practical figuring out aside. Make best sense of what you can. And as David Whyte said about the unknown in one of his poems, territory that we all traverse, be safe in your unknowing. And remember that some things may not be ready for you or others to understand or be fully revealed. And some things, yes, some things are meant to remain beautifully, eternally mysterious. Goodbye for now, and good spirits.